Thank you, guys. I think it's the worst decision in my life, but I'm here. Okay, we can start. So there was a presentation about sidekick, and there was a question about sidekick badges. So I remember that I used them once in all my 4 years, and I can share with you how you can do it. So the first one, we need the source for all our work. In my time, for me, it was a file where there are around thousands of rows which should be executed with some command, and have a result. So if we do not do it like in a sync way, our business gonna cry. So we tried to optimize it somehow. So we used sidekick and batches. So how we did it, we parsed our file, and for each row, we put a worker inside of the batch. So it's like 1 up to, I don't know, 100. So each, and we do a worker. So if we have 100 rows, then we're gonna have 100 workers. I designed to set a unique identifier for all these source. For me, it was like time, name, and maybe that's all. Yeah, so to worker, I passed time, name, and the sequence number. Like, let's be people, it's gonna start with 1. So, what we do? Here I have a unique ID for this row, which identifies the sequence. And when I execute the command, the result I put to the Redis, where there's a key with this sequence number. Like it starts with third sequence number and unique number and ends with sequence. So I put it to the Redis, and while I finish all my 100 jobs, I will have in Redis like 100 results, and that is the end. But I set a callback for all this batch, and it knows the unique source name. So in callback, I write one more worker, why not? Like finish result, which knows this unique name, and it knows that we have 100 rows in our file. So when all the jobs from the batch were finished, I start this finish result worker, which goes like where people 1 up to 100, and reads from Redis the source name and each sequence. So here I go the result of all my jobs, and I make one more file. One more file, which is as you got result file. And I have, as a result, I have source params. Then I made some comment on them. And then I have the result of this comment here. And they have the same sequences as in the source file. And business is happy. So that's all, actually. I hope nobody has question, but anyway.
So the question is, how fast does an Artemis rocket need to be going to escape Earth's atmosphere and reach a stable orbit? And now the answer is, I honestly don't care if you know how to do this, because I'm assuming you're not rocket scientists. and I'm assuming not everyone here is a Kerbal Space fan program, but I highly recommend it. No, I'm actually interested in a very different question, is nobody flinches when you ask, how fast were you going? And you think this is normal, but it's not normal. It's a modern invention. Because if we go back a long, long time with a working clicker, to the time of Aristotle and Socrates, these guys were working with maths, right? But the maths they were working with was mostly geometry and trigonometry. And they were working with this idea that the world is perfect, there's perfect circles, perfect triangles, angles, so forth and so forth. They were not worried about the real world and how mathematics applies to the real world, and they also could not explain momentum and how things move. Because from their perspective, it was a side effect-y kind of thing. You know, things were changing, and they didn't like that so much. And it turns out that that was the way of the world for a really long time. Because as soon as my screen updates, I don't know what's going on. All right, so my slides are not updating. But what should be shown is Galileo and Descartes. And Galileo, among all his other contributions, what he did was he realized that time is a unit of measurement. And it turns out that before him, nobody kind of figured it out or made it explicit. So Galileo figured out that time is a unit of measurement, and then Descartes, among all his other contributions, created the Cartesian coordinate system, which actually figured out that geometry and algebra are not separate fields of study, they're actually the same thing. Just two sides of the same coin. And then, after that, Descartes was able to, on the Cartesian plane, plot time on the x-axis, and it turns out that we have sort of modern mathematics, almost. Because then Leibniz and Newton came along, and they both invented calculus, right, in one way or another, at the same time, basically, using those things that Galileo and Descartes invented, like 7 years before them. And why are we talking about all of this? Because the important thing is time. And the important thing is, until Galileo figured out that time is a unit of measurement and sort of gave to the world this idea that here's an idea, see how far you can run with it. Nobody ever figured it out. And for them, this concept of how fast are you going was science fiction. But for us, it's common knowledge, right? When we think of how fast are you going, you're thinking some cop is giving me a speeding ticket. You're not thinking I'm reinventing mathematics. So why are we talking about this? I'm giving a talk tomorrow that's theoretical about functional programming, but it's not about functional programming. It's about giving new names for things that I want you to start thinking about. Because what we have today, whether it's functional programming, DDD, it's all crap. We're in the time of like pre-Socrates. What we need is new ideas that are going to spur the next future generations that are going to be the Newtons and the Leibnizes of our time, until we can get to art, until we can actually get into outer space. So every time you listen to a talk by Andre or anyone else where they're giving ideas and concepts, I want you to sort of think about that the important thing is not the current library or the current whatever thing. It's, can I take whatever they're doing and sort of figure out what is the essence of it? And can I take that essence and apply it to whatever I'm actually working on? Can I create new names for things that can then be defined as, because once you name something, you can actually then figure out what are the properties of this thing that I've just named, right? So that's all I've got, really. I'm actually before time, aren't I? Or you just stop the clock. All right, I'm done, whatever.
1, 2, nice. We can start. Okay, hi everyone, my name is Andrew. I work as an outsource company at main developer at the project, sometimes tech lead, depends on the project. And for sure, at all outsource companies, projects change from time to time, our teams change from time to time, and at our company, we have different levels of projects, and for sure, sometimes there are junior projects which you need to mentor. And for sure, this opportunity comes usually to the main developer or the tech lead, and Not everybody likes this, yeah? But why I decided to choose this topic? Because I'm totally the opposite. I like it a lot. I mentor at work, at my project, just in the company, and I mentor during my free time. And I have a list of options why I do that. It helps me to study because at certain level you just fed up with courses, books, um, conferences and stuff, and you want some not trivial questions which often comes from juniors because I experience a lot of such questions which indicate me. It can be both. It can be with your technical skills and it can be with your soft skills because for sure we want to develop both of them. You help to educate engineers of your company, and it means you help to make your company become better. And if you don't like it, you can ask your company to pay for mentoring if you need more money. And very important point for me is that you help to grow your community because to struggle to this question that Ruby is dying, no, it's not dying, we're making more engineers. And I really like the social aspect of that because apart from the company, you want, and I want to help community, not only Ruby, but all people. That's why in my free time, I mentor refugees from Ukraine and political immigrants from Belarus. And I hope these key points maybe motivate one of you and you find motivation to do the same. And for me, in all the volunteering stuff, the main point is find what motivates you. Yeah, it may be one point from this list, or it may be your own list or your own points. That's it. Thank you.
The question on the whiteboard still bothers me because it's unanswered about Ruby dying. And I am wondering, like, why do we even ask this question? What's the motivation behind this? Because we are, I see this all the time, like Ruby is dead or like, is Ruby dying? And I'm wondering, like, where does it come from?
Okay. So I didn't want to make anybody sad today. Yeah, I'm just asking. But I saw different companies, and usually they move from the Ruby because Ruby is too slow. And we're trying to use JRuby, but now Rust is coming, and maybe I just can't get how we can support Ruby, and I don't want to change it, but I see that every company I work, I agree maybe they're wrong, but anyway, they trying to use and move on different language. So that is my point. And don't be sad.
I'm not sad, like, I don't believe this. I mean, I believe your arguments because some people are claiming this, but I'm not sure if this is just the cycle that new things pop up, like Rust, and which is great. I didn't hear about JRuby for quite some time, so it's good to hear that it's somewhere, it's still there. Yeah, so I just think that we, like, some of us here are in the Ruby world for a long time here, and some of us are maybe more newcomers. And like even when I joined Ruby, I can say for myself, it was obviously the argument of the new shiny thing. So I switched from Java to Ruby. But then I think many people stay at Ruby, so that's a good thing. The only, and I have to admit, there is this precedence that some people moved to Elixir. That was a movement in the Ruby community. But apart from Elixir, I didn't see really a big like outflux of people in the community.
Looking at the data, isn't Ruby declining in popularity? Like if you look at those for example, Stack Overflow every year they publish this data, and basically it seems that Ruby is declining.
Like, I didn't study the exact numbers, but usually the trend is like the proportions are changing. So Ruby relatively, for example, to Python or to JavaScript might be slower in popularity increase. But usually when I looked, like some years ago, when I looked at the number of Ruby developers is increasing instead of decreasing. It's just we are sad sometimes because the number of Python developers is increasing faster. And we would like it to be like at the same pace at least, which is not the case, and probably we shouldn't try to compete with Python. But also, if we try to compete with Python, for example, Python is used for so many different purposes right now, for data science, for web, for and many other parts, while Ruby is only for web. So even if we look at the communities, we should probably split the communities, like Python web, Python data science, and then compare. Because I'm not sure like if Ruby web is really much lower than Python web, for example, or Rust web. Maybe not. Okay, that was just me taking some time when Jan is ready. So let's welcome Jan.
Is it working? Okay, it's working. Thanks. So let's talk about configuration and configuracja states for configuration in Polish. And what is the state of the art right now in Ruby world and Rails world? So you have Rails credentials, you have global Rails application config, you have config for helper that allows you to load YAM configuration files, you have environment variables, you have libraries like Figaro or .env that allows you to handle configuration values on different ways. And all these solutions have different problems, like you have to know where is your specific configuration. I mean, your code has to know where is the configuration. Like in the example, you have to use env or some other source directly. It's hard to handle defaults or override them. You have to base on ifs or ors. It's hard to distinct that some of the defaults should be available only in development and not on a specific deployment. Lack of coercions, lack of verification that you actually provided values that should be provided unless the application explodes on the production. And it's easy to end up with environment hell, with dozens of variables and a complete mess with configuration. So it ends up with the problem that your code has to know the infrastructure. Infrastructure leaks into your code base, but you can better. And I really encourage you to watch this presentation that introduces, for example, anyway config library that takes this approach completely differently from different perspective. So instead of knowing where is your configuration, you provide classes how you would like to configure your application with some specific keys, and that's all. The rest is done by the library itself, and it has different loaders that goes one by one and tries to load variables from different sources, like from environment, from a YAM config that follows the convention of naming, etc. And you end up with specific values in a class that is completely independent how your infrastructure looks like on a development, on specific stage, on deployment, etc. And this solution is really cool. I really like it, but I don't like the syntax. It's really not so friendly, at least for me. So I thought that maybe we can use this concept, but with different syntax that is familiar with dry struct. And this is how configuracja game was born. So it's the same concept. You have class where you define what kind of values you would like to have. You can use coercions from the dry struct. And it has different loaders. You can easily create your own loader that, for example, will load data from, I don't know, Vault, AWS, some source, S3, whatever. And it will go one by one, try to load data if there exists, and if not, it will just go to another loader and simply provide you values that you want to use in your application. It's still not production ready, it's very early development, but you can at least watch it on GitHub and follow for releases. Yeah, that's all, thanks.
Okay, hello again. I have a lightning talk, write a blog. Basically, that could be it, but I'll say a couple of more things. So I've heard somewhere that the human brain is wired up not so much to like memorize stuff, but to solve problems. And well, sometimes I fix some kind of like heavy thing, like I do some kind of heavy sequence of tasks, like implementing a new API or like creating some kind of flow, and a few months later or a few years later, I want to do it once again, and I kind of nearly have to learn it all once again. Like, I don't remember these things really well. And a thing that I've started doing a couple of years ago, that I wish I started like 10 years ago, is writing a blog. And the main target audience is not like the world, but yourself in the future. So like, it helps you, I think, at least helps me become a better developer. While writing, you kind of better understand the concepts of what you've implemented, and I often come back to my blog just to see how I did something in the past. So just most importantly, write for the future self, and it will reward you in the future.